Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Jess Marshall here with the Jess Marshall Podcast. Thanks for joining us this week. This week, I've got the honor and privilege of interviewing my friend Matt Fossey with Invoke and Fundamental Sports Management and the Royal Guard Apparel. Matt is a very interesting guy. I think you're going to get a kick out of this podcast. He started an NBA agency with a friend of his. He's co-founder. We've had numerous talks over the last several months, and I asked him to come on the podcast. If you will recall, I had his wife on a couple of months ago. She's an author, so this is going to be a really good one. We talk about adversity, mindset, entrepreneurship, making sure that you make every day the best you can. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll talk to you after. What'd you end up studying in or focusing on at Baylor?
Finance.
Yeah, right on.
Business and finance.
Have you always been interested in that field?
Yeah, I was always a business guy, I think. I grew up caddying, and so that kind of, being in and around it all the time from a young age kind of got me, interested in deals and kind of what people were doing. And I had a golf coach who was very much an entrepreneur, and so he kind of helped with some things as far as just mindset goes. But, at a young age, caddying, I didn't always know what I wanted to do, but I knew whatever it was, it wanted to be something that allowed me to go play golf during the week like these guys.
Yeah,
and so,
no doubt.
So I just paid attention and listened, and that's kind of as I graduated and started off doing things, like it was trying to make sure that was what I was doing, as opposed to being so concerned with like the space I was in. It was more of the space that allowed me to do some of the other things that I wanted to do.
Sure. Would you consider that golf coach a mentor?
He was. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so.
Taught you a lot just about life, business.
Yeah.
You said mindset.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, big time. So I think also working how I did from a young age of 11, caddying for these guys, and you learned about taking risks. Like I grew up in a household where it was fairly stable, but parents worked the same place for their whole careers, and so that was sort of like the idea of what you just do. You grow up, you go to college, you get a job, and you stay there till you retire. And I think if I hadn't had the golf coach that I had, if I hadn't caddied, I would have never have known the alternative of like what taking risks are, or the importance of trying to get into something on the ground floor, the return on that potentially, and just overall being comfortable with kind of what some of those things are. So that was a huge component of it, and it started for me when I was 11.
Yeah, becoming and being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
is what living a DIY life is about, where your involvement in something has a lot to do with its success or the lack thereof.
Yeah.
Well, there's a hell of a lot of pressure that comes with that.
Yeah, and as you elevate up into different scenarios, even to this day, you're still getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Because the levels change and the circumstances change, because every month, every quarter, every year, the environment changes, and you got to be adaptable and figure out how to continue to make decisions to move things along as things just evolve. And they've absolutely evolved like crazy over the last 12 to 24 months, with different things, and I think that's going to keep continuing for the next 2, 3, 4 years for sure.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I don't think. I don't think 2020 was anything compared to what 2021's.
It was a prelude. I think it's a prelude.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I think 2021 told 2020 to hold its beer, especially last week.
It'll get really interesting when things are stopped being propped up, right? 2020 was bad. 2021 is not so great as a start, but things are still being artificially propped up, by a lot of factors, government-wise or what have you. And when and if that ends, you will see the true fallout of whatever, 2021 started.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, didn't the ACH system go down yesterday for several hours? I mean, you start messing with people's money.
Yeah, I saw that headline. Yeah.
It's just insane, man. And whatever it was that happened with GameStop and Robinhood 2-3 weeks ago.
AMC now. I mean, all of it.
There's all kinds of indicators.
Yeah.
That there is for sure trouble brewing.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you use a term like mindset, what does that mean to you in a nutshell?
Really, in a nutshell, it's just making sure that one word is flexibility. In that I like to focus a lot on where I'm starting, and also where I want to go. Right, focus by starting on the end, and then working backwards to figure out like where you're at. And then putting the steps in place that you need to get to where you want to go, right? I mean, it's seems super simple, but the different instances, different environments that I've been in, it takes a lot of work to assess the true starting point, because there's what you think, that's what you've been told, but once you roll up your sleeves and actually start to get into it, whether it's financials, whether it's strategy, people, you start to uncover like the true starting point, and only then, do you understand like the amount of work and the steps that you think you have to take to get to what you think the end result still is. So from a mindset perspective, it's the difference between kind of having a fixed mindset, versus an open mindset. And I get involved with a lot of people where you can see right off the bat, based on their mindset, that determines a lot of the decisions that you have to make and how you approach making those decisions. Because there are a lot of people who are very, very successful who got to be successful by doing it a specific way all the time. And if they do it for long enough, it's very difficult for them to even come up with the idea that they should do it differently or could do it differently. Versus those with more of an open mindset around having things come at you every day and being open to the idea that I might have to alter how I'm attacking this, or I'm going to not put blinders on and actually see what's coming at me and continue to steer in a direction that gets me to where I want to get to, but the path that I'm going to take might be completely different than the path I thought I was going to take, just because the circumstances of what you're uncovering or what's coming at you in the environment is different than what you expected.
What steps do you take in terms of your personal life, your self-care, to foster and really curate that mindset in yourself to be able to shift on the fly, roll with the punches, adapt, embrace adversity, see adversity as an opportunity, all those things that successful people do? Those don't just happen. You don't just wake up one day and all of those skills are acute and sharp. You have to foster those. What do you do? Is this a gym routine? I've got a sleep routine. I've got a nutrition routine. Or what are some of those tangible, practical things you do to keep your mindset sharp?
Working out's something that we try and do. Whether it's taking a walk or I'm not right before COVID, I dropped the gym membership. It just so happened the timing of it was perfect because they had gyms closed down anyway. So I haven't done the gym thing religiously for at least a year like I used to. But for me, it's kind of about setting boundaries. And that's one of the things as I transitioned in my late 30s to what I do now. It was the realization of some important boundaries that needed to exist in order to sort of allow your mind the time to operate, but also allow the time necessary for family, for kids, and recognizing that the balance is really what allows you to operate at a high level. as opposed to some of the singular nature of only doing something and doing it over and over and over and over again, you lose perspective and balance. And admittedly, I did for quite a while there. As I approached 40, and so as I do what I do now, it's important that I keep that balance and that I establish those boundaries. And I think that's been a huge catalyst in keeping the mind sharp, because I'm very protective of time and protective of what I utilize it and who I utilize it with, and that keeps me from burnout.
Sure.
Because I got burnt out.
Yeah. If you're anything like me, then you are a self-admitted either recovering or absolute workaholic, to where if I didn't have family or boundaries, I could for sure eat, sleep, maybe hit the gym, and then work the rest of the time. So I could literally work a 16-hour day and probably still stay alive for a while.
Yeah.
But yes, rubbing up or bumping up against burnout is, I for sure.
Yeah, I like to work. I do. I've never thought 9 to 5 is a thing. Even at night, computer on the lap, TV show on, ball game on, maybe a glass of bourbon, whatever. I'll just keep going until I'm done. And there are times where that goes on for days, and then there are times when it stops at a particular time. But I've never defined a day, starting stop based on a time. It's defined on when I'm finished, or when I'm to a point where I feel comfortable being finished, to where I can pick it up again the next day. But I've never punched the clock, so to speak, and said, "Oh, it's 5, I'm done."
Yeah.
And with kids, having 4 kids, having a very professional wife and a busy schedule, you have to. It gets complicated as it relates to deciding when you're going to stop one thing to go be present at another, and then plug back in when it's time before the evening's out.
Sure.
To finish.
Do you think that your work ethic came partly from that mentor early in your formative years, and maybe from watching your parents grind it out for 30 years at the same place?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something to be said. You hear it all the time. The Midwestern work ethic.
Yeah.
I born in Minnesota. I was raised there. I didn't leave until I was 20 to come to Texas, and so I think a lot of it is from my parents and watching them, and the repetitiveness of getting up every day, going, working, providing, coming home, and just being told from the get-go, that's what it is. There is no alternative. And then also, seeing whether it's the mentor who's the golf coach, or just, again, going back to my time caddying, just seeing, the overall work ethic of what that is. It's important. And so I've always kind of been that way. Thankfully, my wife is that way. We're very equally yoked in that perspective. We both kind of believe it's a workaday world. And, we teach our kids that, but it's never really been an option. It's just been sort of an acceptance that that's what it is.
Yeah, she talked about that on her podcast, that you support her, she supports you, as you guys are not content just living average lives. Hey, let's at least go for it here.
Well, and she's sort of the best kind of supporter in a sense that a lot of what we've been able to achieve together, she's enabled for me personally and professionally, because of wanting to be an important part of our kids' lives, raising them as their mom, sacrificing her career for so many years. What I've been able to achieve so far is not possible without the space and the time that she's created for me, because of the commitment that she's had with the children. I mean, I'm very much involved too, but for a long time there, I was on the road every day for most weeks, and she sacrificed a lot in her professional career to be there for them, which gave me the comfort to go do what I had to do. And so as we've both turned the table of, turning 40 a couple of years ago, and her with her writing, which you explored, and me with some of the entrepreneurial stuff. A lot of it is grace. A lot of it is, kind of a prayerful approach to what we do, but also a lot of it is the decisions we made at an early age, and the experiences and learning and the sacrifices to kind of get to a point where, 2 years ago we thought, hey, let's figure out the next phase and kind of do what we want to do and see how long it lasts. And so far it's lasted for a few years and it's been fun.
Yeah, that's very cool. When you stepped out of Baylor, were you stepping right into the tax prep?
Yep.
Tax space.
Yeah.
Was that right into Invoke? Or
No. That Invoke's a relatively new thing.
Okay.
I started off right out of college, and it was really, we got married 2 weeks after we graduated from college. I mean, we had job offers and got married, went on a honeymoon, and came back and started our jobs. And so we both found jobs relatively close in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I started at a larger non-Big Four accounting firm. I was there for a year or so. She went to a engineering firm, right, where she did airplanes and fighter jets and all that fun stuff. And then from there, I kind of moved my way up to a Big Four firm. And then again, I think one of the critical decisions was when I was about 26 years old. I had a chance to go start at a company that was doing a leverage buyout of themselves from the Big Four and starting themselves as an independent entity. This was about the time of Sarbanes-Oxley back in the day, where their service line was no longer going to be funded by the Big Four firm because of the conflict it created with audit. And so I had the chance to interview with this firm before it spun out of KPMG, and was offered a verbal offer to come join them as their first employee in 4 months once they executed all the paperwork. And so that was sort of like my first really big professional decision, was to leave something that was very structured, very comfortable, very consistent, to go jump into being sort of the first hire of a firm that, when I left, they were like, well, they're not going to be around in 6 months. And I'm like, then you'll hire me back in 6 months.
Yeah, right.
So that was really the second, the second step of professional development. The first was having my parents and having sort of my golf coach and the folks that I caddied for when I was really young, and listening and learning and just kind of paying attention, observing. But professionally, it was then taking a step to where I had another set of people who were investing in me, right? And you have to meet them both ways. I mean, you have to show up and show them that you're interested, work hard, show them that you're involved in what they're doing and that you want to see it be successful. But ultimately, I was fortunate to have, people continue to invest in me, and put me in positions to continue to grow. And I was there for 15 years, and I started off as the real estate guy that worked Dallas. And when I left, I was president of the company. And so I realized that's fortunate, right? To be able to stay in a spot for that long, and every year or a year and a half continue to move up and achieve your goals professionally, is unique. To do that,
you must have been producing some good results.
Sure, yeah. There's always the production aspect of it. Absolutely, you have to produce. But to not have to jump every 3 to 5 years to a new company to advance, to continue to have the folks there that believed in what you were doing, and you showed them you're interested in what they were doing, and continue to have results and listen. I've always been a fan of partnering with people that have more experience than me. Whether that's age, or whether that's just pure experience, because I think that there's a lot you can learn from people who have come before you.
I love that, man.
Yeah,
the glory of the young men is their strength. The glory of the old men is their wisdom.
Correct, yeah.
And wisdom gets you a lot further in business than brute force strength energy does.
And the cool thing as now that I'm becoming older, right, and I'm becoming the guy who's hiring kids half my age, which is still bizarre to think about, is you see that if you are the young person that takes an interest in what the older person has to say, then they're going to very much want to invest what they've learned in you, because you're showing an interest in what they have to say and where they've come from, right? And so that, I think, now that I'm older and see some of the things from the last 20 years, that had a lot to do with where I was able to go, or what I was able to do, because I liked listening to what they had to say. I liked listening and hearing and executing on how they wanted me to do it, because I was learning, but I was ultimately showing them I was interested in them along the way, and that had a lot to do with their interest in me.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I ask this question of almost everyone who comes on here. Have there been people, professionals in your life that you identified that's someone who knows what they're talking about, that's got that experience? I am going to actively pursue them for their advice, their coaching, their mentorship. And have you ever approached someone that kind of gave you the cold shoulder when you tried that? And did you let that deter you if that ever did happen?
Yeah, absolutely. It didn't deter me. I just moved on to the next person. Because there are people who are very much good at what they do, but believe they're going to do it forever and don't have any interest in the next generation. A few people I worked with very early in my career were that way. But ultimately, I just kept working and got the attention of people that were very interested in succession, very interested in passing along, what they knew and to somebody else, and was very fortunate to be in a position to be the receiver of that, multiple times over.
That's awesome. I tell all the guys and gals who work with me, if there's somebody who's doing it better than you, track them down, man.
Yeah.
Go
find it.
Go do whatever you got to do to get an hour of their time. Do it, because that's going to pay you back tenfold.
Yeah.
And don't be passive about it either, because people who are good at their job, people who are high achievers, high earners, high performance folks, they don't have a ton of throwaway time. They treat their time like you and I do, very, very valuably, which, by the way, thank you for
this is awesome
for coming here. I really appreciate it.
I've watched your this for quite a while and thought it'd be the highlight to be on here with you.
Well, we had an awesome convo in December.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, you will be the gold standard for all of the Jess Marshall podcast moving forward. But chasing those people down and being active, following up, not being annoying or a stalker, but hey, I really like the way you do business. I'd really like to meet up with you. What can I do to facilitate that? I will come to your office. I will do this. I will do that. Because a lot of people who do have an abundance mindset are all about passing on, hey man, this has not worked.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you all about that. Then I'm going to show you this that I have found that does work.
Yeah.
I mean, I, for example, was on a phone call yesterday with a guy. He's probably 30 years older than me. And he's been working in this insurance restoration business for a long time. He is the most knowledgeable guy I've spoken with. And I talk to people every day. I meet people 8 times a week, probably.
Yeah.
Meet with him, talk to him. This guy blew my socks off, man. And I was like, bro, we gotta get together. Where do you live? He lives in Red Oak.
Yeah.
I'm going to Red Oak tomorrow to meet up with this guy. And he was like, yeah, man, bring it on. Let's go.
Yeah.
And when people reach out to me, I do the same thing. I'm sure when people reach out to you, you do the same thing. Do you have mentors now?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I still talk with my parents, on certain things. My golf coach unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But until that point in time, whenever I'd go back to Minnesota, I'd always make a point to go see him. But some of the ones that were very influential for me in my beginning of my professional career that I had mentioned are still my mentors. I mean, there are still 2 or 3 people that I talk to before I make any sort of important professional decision.
Really?
Bounce them off, bounce the idea, what I'm thinking, what do you think? And, they taught me early on about the whole, the right side list, the left side list, all that mess, which is still very important. But ultimately, I don't do anything professionally without having a conversation with each of them.
You got your corner men.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And you go bounce it off them, and I'm sure your better half, and go, okay, what are we going to do here? And then make a decision based on probably your gut a lot, but also it's amazing when you talk to somebody who's been there.
Yeah.
They go, man, that's what you just rattled this whole thing off, and 90% of that sounds good, but man, there's 10% in there that's a massive red flag.
Yeah, what about this? Yeah.
And if you're anything like me, I blow past red flags, man. I'm like, I can...
They're not for me.
I can overwhelm that. Yeah. I can bum rush
Red flags are for somebody else.
Yeah. Not for me. That red flag means nothing to me. But man, red flags are red flags.
Yeah.
They will bugger up a deal in a heartbeat, man.
Yeah. Yeah, they will. I learned this concept probably 5 or 6 years ago, which until I had met this other person, I never even occurred to me as a concept. But it's called it's serial probability. You know, and for those that have heard of it, they're probably like, well, of course, right? But I had never heard of it. And basically, it's you look at what you're trying to accomplish, and then you look at the steps, each of the steps that need to happen for the end to be successful, and you're just assigning a probability of success to each one of those steps. And then it's just math to determine like what the overall probability of success is. And so prior to that, I operated a lot with my gut and a lot with my feel. And I still think I have a pretty good feel. But that interaction really created an additional sort of thought process on how to break down the steps to success and the probability that each step would be or could be successful to determine then the overall probability of success to something. And so, again, there's no mathematical formula that I can tell you that says this is how I do it, but just, you know, you figure out, you know, the 5 keys or the 3 keys or whatever they are to the overall thing being successful, and then you break down each one into its singular shape to determine how successful can I be, you know, with this one. Okay, now if this one works, then I got to go to this one and to this one. And if all 3 of them line up, then I've got it. But each one of the steps are different, you know, depending on what you're doing. So that was a very eye-opening concept when it was first brought up in a meeting, because I was like, what is that? I wrote it down, right? And then I went home and Googled it. I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And then you start picking their brain about, what do you mean by this and this and this? And then they just like, they open up because you're interested, right? And they tell you everything that they know about that because you've engaged in being interested. Yeah. And then you learn, right?
Isn't one of the challenges when you're young and you're a hustler that you, or at least I, discounted the red flags, but then also just some of the obstacles. Oh, I can get over that hurdle.
Yeah.
Well, that son of a bitch was a 20-story skyscraper where I thought that was no big deal.
Yeah.
That was a doozy. And having perspective is so important. And when you have no perspective because your career span is 7 years, 5 years, 4 years, whatever, and you're talking to somebody who's been in the business for 30, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
It's talking to Belichick instead of Cliff Kingsbury, you know?
Well, you start to see the difference between like the textbook and reality, you know? And you get out of school and you're very much convinced that the textbook is correct because that's what you've been taught. And then the more experience you have, you realize the textbook is just a guide, a small guide, you know, because reality is reality. You know, is it Tyson who said you have a plan until I punch you in the face?
Absolutely. Everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
no doubt about it.
That's true of everything.
Yeah.
You know,
when you're studying finance, getting ready, did you know I'm going to study finance? I'm going to go right into tax?
No.
The tax space?
No.
Did it just all kind of line up fortuitously for?
Yeah, it's like I said, we got married 2 weeks after we graduated from college, and we were more concerned about finding jobs in the same relative geographical location than what it is that we'd be doing. So I interviewed with some banks. The time when I graduated, the banks were kind of not super strong. There was stuff going on in 2003, 2002, with some bank stuff. So even though that's what I thought I wanted to do was be a banker, I didn't ultimately get an offer from the bank until after I'd accepted my other offer. And so I interviewed with a tax company, and they had said, okay, well, what's your background? And I said, finance. So they said, all right, well, you're just going to go in property tax then because you've got a financial background. I was like, great. What does that mean? Well, you're going to do real estate valuations. Oh, it sounds great. Right. And so that was it. Like they don't teach property tax in college. There's no curriculum for it. It was just one of those things where I was, again, I knew, and I tried to tell this to guys coming out of college now, hey, just start somewhere. Don't try and find your dream job. Like your dream job is created through effort and through work and through experience. It's good to have an idea, but don't sit on the sidelines for a year waiting for that to happen. Just get started. And so that was sort of my mentality. I had some student debt too, which was a nice motivator to getting started.
Yeah.
So I just got started and went from there, and never really thought that I would stay in tax, as long as I did. But through it, I learned how to run a business, how to scale things, how to work with people. And it was interesting. I mean, there was, in the real estate side, I was in different submarkets, different property types, in different states of the country. And so you get a chance to have some diversification around what you're looking at. And that just, that made it interesting enough to stick it out long enough to then transition from the execution of the tax profession to building a tax business and learning how to run the business. Which as running a business is kind of the same core, regardless of what business it is. But you have to have subject matter expertise in what you're doing before you can really proficiently run whatever it is you're doing. So I that's what I did for quite a while, and then transitioned after about 10 years into learning how to run the business, and that's what I did.
And then when you started Invoke, the risk there, was that just, hey, this is our own deal, and there's the risk of, hey, I know this business, but how are we going to get clients because the clients are previously been built in? Or
yeah, so good question. So when I left the big company that I was at, I just turned 40, or I was about to turn 40. My wife calls it my midlife crisis, but it was more of my pivot, right? It was not a crisis involved whatsoever.
That's right. Yeah,
I knew exactly what I was doing.
What are you talking about, Brooke?
But no, it was more of a realization that I was burnt out from what I was doing, but I also had learned enough to say, hey, I want to try and live the rest of my professional life doing things that I'm interested in, with people that I like, where I feel like I can add significant value. That was sort of like, that's what came out of it for me.
It's like a mission statement.
Yeah, it was my mission. Yeah, exactly. And so when I left my previous profession or job, I didn't really have an idea of what I was going to do. I only had an idea of those three things. And so I sort of sheepishly decided to start my own business consulting firm. I had been working in the space I'd been in the last 5 years. I'd been with private equity hold, so I worked with a lot of very smart people, highly educated people on, the whole Ivy League type of MBA stuff where you learn about serial probability, and really was a sponge. So even though that experience was very challenging and not always fun, I knew that I was learning a skill that I wasn't having to write a big check for to go to an Ivy League school to get. And so I stayed on until I couldn't anymore or didn't want to anymore. And so when I left, I started my own consulting company where I started to help small businesses answer those very same questions: how to scale, how to evaluate sales, how to evaluate operations, accounting and finance, right? The three pillars of anything that's strong, and really do it from a mom and pop perspective, right? I mean, I love growing businesses from let's say 2.5 or 3 million of revenue up to say 50 or 60. right? Once it gets above that, it gets really, not fun in my opinion, because you have to have a whole bunch of stuff in place, like HR and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, comptrollers.
All that stuff. All that stuff would make it no fun. But the entrepreneurial ramp up, that 2 to 30 or 40 or 50 stage is really fun, because every day you're rolling up your sleeves and you're making decisions that really help impact what it's doing. And so I'd started that on my own, just me, and we're hired by a few people to kind of help them evaluate those parts of their business and put together plans for how they can better sales and make more efficient operations and all that good stuff. And so I met a company that was a client of mine and did that. And they had a really unique opportunity that I don't think they saw. And so I kind of laid out the opportunity and said, hey, but here's the deal. Like, you need to find somebody who can lead it, who's a central voice, that is the person that everybody looks up to and helps you guys make decisions. And I left it at that. And they'd call me back sometime after the fact. And I thought they were going to ask me to help them find that person. And they ultimately asked me if I wanted to be that person. And so my, the fullness of my own consulting firm lasted not as long as I anticipated. I still have it. I still help on the side, with certain businesses, like the Royal Guard, as I mentioned before, and some others. But I very, shortly thereafter decided to take on being the CEO of what is now Invoke. It was a different company name prior, and one of the first things that we did was rebrand it, because if we wanted to be bigger, we had to have a name that felt bigger and that could support, again, the destination that we wanted to go to, and so we renamed it and rebranded it and relaunched it, within the first 6 or 7 months, into Invoke, which was really what we wanted to be. Not necessarily where we were starting out at. So it was a 15-year-old business that was just kind of humming along, and we've definitely scaled it up in the last 2 years into something that I think is pretty unique. It's independently owned. It's got 80 people. It's got 11 offices, and it's doing some pretty cool things in the marketplace, given the opportunities that are in it, and it's exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
A lot of people say you can either be a money numbers person or a people. Mm-hmm. Like I can know money and numbers, or I can know people. You know both, and do well with both. But were both of those equal strengths coming right out of college, or did you have to grow the people, working with people, learning people, watching for those warning signs in people? Did you have to grow that, or were you equally as adept at both the money and numbers and the people side?
I think the people side I understood at a young age, and again, I can't say it enough, but my experience as a caddy for almost 10 years, I really learned how to listen. I really learned how to pick up on things. I just all the deals that went down on the course where I was carrying someone's bag. Yeah. You learn real quickly what someone who's telling the truth looks like, and someone who's genuine looks like, and someone who's just trying to say what they need to say to get a deal done. You pick up on that, and I would say that I'm very fortunate to have had almost a 10+ year head start on those lessons. Because I learned them very young, because I was exposed to them. The number stuff just came. I liked math to a certain extent, never calculus, never anything that would get me into being like a scientist or anything like that. But I knew numbers enough to be interested in them from a financial and a business perspective. But having people along the way, again, take me under their wing and show me how a P&L really works, and how the balance sheet works, and how the strategies around growing certain things and categorizing things appropriately. That continues to come to this day with people that I'm partnered with and work with that continue to teach me those things, and I think that's super important. Like I learn things every day new, and I'm open to it, and I enjoy it. And that just goes back to, I think, my upbringing and understanding that anybody can teach you anything. It doesn't matter, if they're more successful than you. It doesn't matter if they're less successful than you, whatever that means, right? You can learn something new from everybody every day. And that's something that I've kind of always believed and tried to practice.
Yeah. You mentioned working with people who you like.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that has come from working with people who
you didn't like.
How hard is it to, especially when you're running your own deal, go, man, I really don't like this person, but gosh, they produce results.
Yeah.
And where does that start to, cross the threshold of this is damaging our culture, our company culture, and we can't have this person, even if their results are great, because they're not all the way bought in. And how interested have you become in culture now that you're doing what you're doing now? That's the fun part of what you're doing currently.
Culture is huge. One of the business I had mentioned before, the tax business that I jumped into at a young age, its success for the first 10 years, 12 years was all about culture. So I learned in a very culture positive environment the importance of it, how that translated into motivation of staff, into especially in professional services, into the work product, into keeping clients happy. Like I lived that for 10 years, and then the last 4 or 5 or so years when we got involved with various investment levels and private equity, which was very educational. You also saw the destruction of a culture because the focus became less about the process, right, and more about just the end result or the bottom line. And so it sort of lost its soul a little bit.
Gosh.
As it relates to the people and working together and banding together, because for so long it was about, if we do things the right way, the results will come. And
trust the process.
Yeah. And it flipped to so focused on the end results because we were now part of an investment hold as opposed to working to do right by clients and by staff and people to take care of them. And so I kind of got the fortunate opportunity to live both, to see the importance and the success of culture in one way and see the very, very quick departure and failure, of an organization because of decisions tied to inverse culture.
You had a courtside seat to that.
I did.
Action.
Yeah, I sure did. And so now as we kind of have taken on and built Invoke, you asked the question about working with people that can produce, but, may not fit the culture. And I would tell you those two experiences have taught me and others that I work with to not even entertain someone who can produce that doesn't fit the culture. Like culture is the one thing you can own and one thing you can protect. And so we've built, whether it's Invoke, whether it's FSM, which we haven't talked about yet, the sports business, like that's all about culture. And the success of those two businesses in particular has been in part due to who we hire, how protective we are of who we hire, and making sure that it always adds value to the staff. Never even is equal to staff, but automatically forces us to level up and to add to it, and ultimately, works within the confines of who we are and what we want to accomplish and how we go about doing it. Certainly, we have differences of opinions, we have differences of experience, which is super important. But at the end of the day, we all believe the way that we want to go about doing something is a particular way, and that it's cliche and interesting, but even if you look at like the Patriots over the years, right, which a lot of people want to throw up over them winning them over and over and over again, but there's a lot of good lessons there around Alabama, right, around the sacrifices people make as individuals to keep the culture going, because winning solves that.
Yep.
right? I mean, people will take less of something if they're a part of something that's winning.
Yes.
And that's the one thing I think, my wife and I kidded about this, and it was actually for real. When I got to a point before I left the big organization I was at, not that it was a significant amount, but financially I was doing better than I'd ever done. But personally, I was never more miserable, and because, again, I learned this from one of my mentors who said, look, assuming you can cover all your bills, you only start paying attention to how much you make when you hate what you do. Right. And so, there was some truth to that. And so it was like, well, I guess if I'm going to stay here, they better pay me. Right. Because I'm not here because I love it anymore. I'm here because I'm getting a paycheck, and it's a nice one, but I'm getting a paycheck. Right. And so, that was a big lesson. Because if you love what you do and you can afford your life, you don't necessarily always pay attention to you're willing to make certain sacrifices to be part of something that's winning. If that means you're going to take a little bit less to be able to afford this person or that person or this deal or that deal. And I think that's super important, because it helps you build your culture.
Would you say that your commitment to culture, that it's safe to say that while it might not be true that one bad apple can spoil the bunch, you're not even going to take that risk?
No.
Because there's so much on the line.
Yeah.
And even if this guy or gal, they check all the boxes, and even if maybe one person on the hiring team is bullish on them, but the others are going, no, not a cultural fit. And even if that one person's like, but we can change them. They'll change. They'll come around. We can bring Antonio Brown in. And he will, right? Because Patriots did that a lot, right?
They tried,
The Bucks.
Yeah. They
did it this year, a couple guys. And those guys do conform once in a while, but sometimes it doesn't work and it blows up in your face. And, do you just have to have this real diehard commitment that if we don't feel like you are reading off the same sheet of music culturally, we're not even going to entertain this?
Yeah, I mean, yes. But even saying yes, you still make that mistake from time to time.
Because people can talk a really good game.
Oh man, and depending on the the financial straits that a company might be in, you're maybe sometimes willing to take on something that you're just not quite so sure about if you think it can elevate your P&L. But every time you do that, or most times you do that, you're very quickly reminded never to do that again. That's just part of life. And that's why discipline's important, and just making sure that you lead with culture, and then it tends to take care of itself if that person can also produce. When
you were running the consulting business and you were helping mom and pops grow from that 2, 3, 5 to 60 million, sales is one of those pillars.
Yeah.
So numbers people say, well, all those pillars are important, but without sales, there's no company.
Right.
Are sales a result of the product? Are they the result of the leads? Are they the result of the sales force who will stop at nothing, will follow up till they're dead on their feet, and will not stop until the deal is signed? What's the biggest driver out of those three for success in sales?
Well, I've only been a part of businesses that sold services. So I've actually, outside of the Royal Guard,
which service is your product.
That's right. No, you're 100% correct. But
I got you.
That's always been has been relationships, your reputation. And so, there's that side of it, which is very much intangible. But then there's also making sure that the tangible things are lined up correctly, understanding what you do as a business, understanding where you do it well, understanding what part of it you do well, understanding what clients you currently have that are the best clients, and understanding what clients you have that are not so much the best clients, right? And then making sure that you're putting together strategy from a sales perspective that very efficiently and effectively pinpoints those things that you do well and where you do it well, to make sure that your probability of being successful in sales is not always tied to volume, but it's tied to quality first, and then from there, you're able to add the volume after you've sort of had the boundary established for yourself of what does a good client look like, what does a not so good client look like, and again with culture, being very, very disciplined and really only going after what good clients look like, because bad clients can derail you just as much as a bad person that you hire can as well, right? Because of the demands, the fees they don't want to pay, all the time they suck away from you, like all of that can be just as detrimental to hiring a bad apple who isn't necessarily interested in your culture.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that sales, when you're selling when you're selling a service, you're selling yourself?
Correct.
I tell my people all the time that the most important thing that you can do is make a client feel a certain way, because they're always going to forget what you say. They're then going to forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. And I don't know who coined that, but it's true as hell.
Yeah.
When you're talking to a client, and now in the sports management, how you make them feel. And we'll get into that now because that's a super exciting thing that you're doing. But how important is that? And how fast can a client read right through the fake BS of, I'm your best friend? They can see right through that. How fast can they see right through that?
I think in the sports space, they start off with that mindset already.
Yeah,
because they have a lifetime of people who are very interested in them for what they do, but probably not always interested in them for who they are. And so our building FSM was around a couple different pillars. One, it was around mentorship. The athletes are going to be good athletes regardless of what myself or my partner Rahul or our team impart in them, right? We're not physical specimens. We're not leveling up since we're 10 years old to be the best players in America. There's not much we can do for them athletically that's going to make them better at what they do.
NBA players might be the best athletes on the planet.
They're incredible. They're just absolutely incredible. But what we try and help them with and understand is that when you're done playing, you have a skill that can provide a legacy for yourself, for your families. We got involved really because we read all sorts of stories about guys who made, $100+ million and then within 5 years of being retired, they're broke. We're like, how is that even possible, right? Like, who are around them that would even allow that to happen? And so that was sort of the impetus of starting what we started. And then also, again, from that mentorship perspective, being like, look, if we can find the athletes who understand the importance of leveling up off the court as much as they have on the court, then that allows us to be involved with them. Certainly we have their basketball, options covered A to Z, marketing perspective, endorsements perspective, teams perspective, great relationships in the front offices with GMs, with the agents that we have on our team, and the relationships that we have in our team. But it's also just important to us to be engaging them in the other businesses that we do, right? So my partner Rahul and myself are entrepreneurs. And so being able to show them those things, to be able to engage them in those things, to be able to teach them those things gives them skills to be successful far beyond their playing days. And that's important to us, making sure that we're not just around for when they're making good money playing basketball, that we're around, all the way. We're creating lifelong relationships that can be very meaningful for all of us.
When you're talking to a young prospect who's thinking about signing with you guys, you're leading with that. You're saying, look, our goal here for this relationship is something long-term, something that takes you through your career, but then into your career after this career. Because if you do it right, you can set yourself up for a long, long time, like you said.
Yeah.
Is that different? Is your approach different than a lot of the people you compete against?
Yeah, it is. And we've learned that through the last 3 years of doing what we're doing. We meet a lot with parents. a lot with extended family, whomever is involved in helping
Cousins,
the family make the decision,
Yeah.
uncles, coaches, all that, and even former players, players that you and I grew up watching play that we now have relationships with, because those are the guys that lived it and are very actively saying, look, if this option was around 15, 20 years ago when I was, 20, 21 years old, then it would have saved me a lot of heartache, and it would have put me in an even better position than I am maybe now.
Antoine Walker wishes he hired
yeah,
you guys.
maybe so, right? But that's a big piece of it. So we have a lot of relationships, with former players who have walked this already, who've lived it, who have made good decisions on their own, who've had good people around them, and that's really, what we've attempted to build and what we actually have built with the people that ultimately work for us as well is sort of that environment, that culture, right? We talked about earlier, the culture of teaming. So much of the space, historically speaking, has been a eat what you kill space. And we've actually built FSM around a team approach, right? So it's not, hey, you're an agent, and you guys compete against each other within the FSM house, to go sign and compete. It's no, we have a marketing team, we have a business development person, we have a relationship person, we have myself, we've got all sorts, and agents alike, and all of us work together to service, our client, because myself and Rahul both came out of service businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
In tax, attorney. And so we've taken the service approach to our agency, which means these folks and players and families get teams of people that they have working for them, not just a specific person. And so that allows for a much different experience than I think what's historically been involved.
Having never seen an actual NBA contract, when this was a brainchild of you and Rahul, when I think he came to you and was like, "Hey, we should do this," right?
Yes.
Isn't that kind of how it started?
Yeah.
Were you thinking to yourself, I wonder what these NBA was wrapping your head around one of those as difficult as maybe I'm thinking that it was, or once you start breaking it down, is it all pretty standardized stuff?
Oh, it's completely standardized stuff.
Yeah.
It's union, right? It's the players' union, right? It's not the factory type of unions that you think about, but it's a union, and so there's a set contract, and there's only a handful of variables that can be negotiated in or negotiated out, but the contract is the contract. Where you get creative and where there's a value add outside of the contract is in a player's marketability. The work that we do for players off the court to advance their likeness and their image, and that's really, really important because the players want to make sure you're paying attention. They want to make sure you're seeing them play. They want to make sure you're at their game, that you're texting with them after the game. Hey, great game, saw you. Or I mean, that's very important. Just like any other client you would have in any other business, you got to have that relationship. But you also have to do what you say you're going to do, right? And that seems so simple to you and to me and to others, but in that space, it's been built on over-promising and under-delivering. That trust becomes a very, very important piece and something that takes a long time to earn. And it all ties to basically and very simply just doing what you say you're going to do, right? That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Just do what you say you're going to do. And we've learned that, very quickly over that 3-year period, the importance of that. And if you do that, then it's a very small space. And those players talk to other players, and those families talk to other families, and you become something that they can rely on and trust. And outside of any other space, trust is such the biggest part of the agency space.
There's a real juxtaposition between your culture of a team-based firm and the NBA, which is a star-driven league, where a guy like James Harden wants out, and he's going to get that done.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a weird line to straddle? Because you guys are over here, team, but your players, I mean, this is a star. More than any other sport except for maybe soccer.
Yeah.
Is this a star? And there's way more players on the field in a soccer game than there are in a basketball game. So this is about players.
Yeah.
Players. I mean, players get coaches fired in this league. Players get GMs fired.
Yeah.
Players get owners kicked out.
Yeah.
Donald Sterling probably should have been, but that was all player driven when that happened.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Because that's very interesting.
Yeah, I could talk about it in the context of a story that I find fascinating and I think represents it. One of our agents who's been in the industry for a long time, 20 or so years, tells me this story about the difficulty of being a point guard in the NBA, and he tells it in the context of imagine being a young point guard whose job it is to run the team. And you've got a coach calling in the play. You've got a wingman who makes $100 million. You've got a center who makes, $75 million. You got another wingman who makes an exorbitant amount of money. And each one of them has incentives in their contracts tied to their performance. And so you've got you as the head of the team running the point. You've got the coach, telling you what he wants you to do, and you've got the pressure of the guys on the floor who are counting on you to get them the ball so they can do enough on their end to get their incentive. I mean, so like it's not as simple as 7th, 8th, 9th grade where I'm the point guard and I'm just playing and off we go. There's all of these factors that come into play that you have to continuously balance. And just that story, which I was told to me, a couple years ago when we got started, is absolutely true, but so fascinating because you realize that even though it's a game and it's fun, it's a business, and the productivity of those guys on the court impacts their ability to do what they want to do, personally as well. So, and it's fascinating and very interesting to kind of get embroiled with those types of stories and hear those examples because it's a business and it's very fun though.
In the NBA, you've got really good organizations.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Mavs are pretty good when they take care of their players.
Yeah.
That's our touchstone here. I don't have a team. I don't have a hometown team anymore because the Sonics don't exist anymore, and I will never root for OKC.
Yeah.
But the Sonics took care of their players back in the day. I was Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, Rain Man, Xavier McDaniel fan.
Yeah.
Does it matter? And is it really a determiner on the trajectory of the career of a player who's not an upper echelon player, but maybe say a middle of the road player, where they go?
I think so. Every player is different as they start their career, and what they need is different. From a coach or from players that they play with, and you can certainly play your way into any situation. They always kind of say, hey, make enough plays to stay on the court, and just keep making enough plays to stay on the court. Like that's your job, right? And but there's a lot that goes into that. If you're a young player, how many veterans are around you that have already made their money or have already had their experiences that just like in business, right, are comfortable and open to sharing with you the things that you need to be successful, versus a very all-around young team where everybody is trying to elbow their way into the spotlight of success. So yeah, and then having coaches with experience and organizations that are very solid, it all factors in. That's why we always sort of are amazed at the similarities between sports and business, right? They're very much the same, with the exception of the product that is in play. The same concepts, the same ideas, the same fundamentals, the same types of relationships. It's all there, and it's just being applied to something different. But yeah, we've absolutely, you can be drafted into a very good situation that allows you to be successful, or you can be drafted into a very difficult situation that makes that level of success that much harder to achieve.
Like a perfect example of this in my mind, I watch a lot of West Coast basketball because I'm a Gonzaga fan because I'm from up there.
Yeah.
But, Gonzaga in their heyday, because they had a couple of down years, but back when Patty Mills was playing at St. Mary's, he was a middle-of-the-road guy, and he's made a hell of a career for himself, but look where he went.
Yeah.
The Spurs. I mean, can you get any more continuity in terms of an organization than that? And he went and he followed their pattern of play, and he plays the way Pop wants him to play, or Becky wants him to play,
whoever,
and he thrives because he makes enough plays.
Yeah.
And he's greatly improved his outside shooting over the span of his career, which is a testament to his work ethic. But that's just an example. Are you guys saying to your clients, man, we don't want to go. We don't want you going to this organization, or are you trying to look at that through a rose-colored lens at all times of, hey, even if you end up at, I don't know, man, Cleveland, the Pistons, maybe I'm off base there. The Nets, well, I'm off base there now, I guess. We're gonna make the best of it.
Yeah.
Is that? I mean, what are you doing there? Are you trying to put a positive shine on every angle?
We're making sure that each player has multiple opportunities put in front of them that we're working with them on as it relates to their next steps. And each one of them is different. Each one of the opportunities and the options are different. And we're ultimately always working with them to evaluate the best of the opportunities that are presented to them, to make sure that based on what we know and what they know, that hey, this is an organization that's a good fit for you. This is an organization that might not be a great fit for you. But the funny thing about that is that all the organizations can be good fits or bad fits depending on the player or what they need to get in the next step of their career. So yeah, it's from that perspective, we're very focused on our player or players in making sure that we're creating the best of the best options for them, and then walking through them with their families, what have you, and making sure that we're putting them forward as it relates to the opportunities.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that that I'm falsely or negatively stereotyping the AAU scene as having a seedy underbelly? Or is that still true, or has that been cleaned up a lot since the FBI investigations into the whole the sneaker sponsorships and all of that? James Wiseman getting in trouble, ended up not being able to play last year, and he gets drafted by is he at the Warriors now? I think the Memphis kid. Yeah. Am I off base there? Do I just not know what I'm talking about, or is there a lot of underhanded stuff with runners and all of this craziness? With
the AAU space is not one that I'm particularly versed in. In fact, my son's playing ball, George, and my oldest son is an 8th grader, and he started to play on an AAU team. And actually, my first experience, with AAU was a tournament he played in a month or so ago, and he's an 8th grader, and walking into that gym and seeing, half of the team that he's about to play throwing down two-handed dunks, with ease because they're 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" in 8th grade. What you do learn is that whether it's AAU or whether it's EYBL, which is Nike's version of AAU, you're going to attract the most elite athletes that an area of the country can get to go then travel. And so you do realize that level is significantly greater than, the level of your high school team, or your, local YMCA team or whatever it might be. You're definitely playing at a higher level where all of a sudden your exposure, to the best of your age division is automatically on display. And so, but yeah, I don't know I mean, I wouldn't say CD, right? But I think that you get a lot of kids that look to their coaches, as second sets of parents because of what they've meant to them and because they've taken them under their wing and because they're with them so often, playing basketball as they're growing up. So it's definitely a faction of who we meet with when we're recruiting kids is we're meeting with their parents, but we're also lots of times meeting with their coaches because they've had that much influence in their lives as well.
If George grows 6-8 inches, and adds I don't know what 10 inches to the vert in the next.
His vert's already there, by the way.
Is it legit? I love it. That's awesome. Is it fair that if a kid's really good at hoops, he's got to go play in college to get drafted, or he's got to go play in the G League to get drafted, or he's got to go overseas? He can't just go straight to the league anymore. I mean, that doesn't seem fair to me. Sekou and I were talking about how unfair it is to top-notch college football players.
Right.
You got to go. Football's a little different because you can't be 19 and roll onto an NFL field.
Right.
You're going to get your teeth kicked in. But there's 17, 18, 19-year-old kids playing pro rugby overseas.
Sure. That
don't have to go to college first.
Right.
Is it unfair to these kids that's the requirement? Is it? I mean, it seems it doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in talent. Talent is talent. Whether you're in sports or in business, and I think that ultimately talent should not have any governor on it. So whether the rule or with the rule being, you have to go to the NCAA for a year before you can go pro. They've changed that, however many years ago. Whether it's fair or not, I think is the determinant of who you are and what your situation is. Because we have guys that play overseas, and I would tell you that educationally, experience, opportunity-wise, some of those guys get a better exposure going overseas than they do playing college basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Because the scouts now and teams like the Mavericks are very much looking at overseas talent. And so your coaching at a certain level is fantastic. Your competition is fantastic. And then their life experiences. I'm in awe of a lot of our players who, grew up in sort of rough parts of town or in small communities, that are somewhat linked to metro areas, go to large colleges for a while, and then are able to go, to Turkey or to Greece or to Germany or to China, right, and play ball over there. The exposure and the education that they're getting outside of just basketball is tremendous.
Yeah.
I'd say it's better than certain educations that I've received or you've received because they're able to immerse themselves in a culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there are a lot of opportunities that are there that if you want to do the 1 year, fine. If you a minimum, if you want to bypass it and go overseas and play and then come, there's ways to do it.
LaMelo Ball did that, right?
Went to Australia. Yeah. Certain players, have done that,
mm-hmm.
and it just again, it's about what's the best opportunity, for where you're at and what you want to accomplish, and then making sure that there's enough variables and options to explore to achieve that.
I'm always fascinated by the hidden gem, the diamond in the rough that kind of falls through the cracks. Dirk traded for Robert Tractor Trailer. That's how he ended up in Dallas. Luka bypassed by several people. The Mavs were throwing everybody off their scent, going after that French point guard instead. I can't remember what his name was, and end up with Luka, who's obviously Luka. The guy is clutch AF. Are those guys who everyone doesn't know about? Are they just becoming fewer and fewer and further between because of the extensive scouting that everyone's doing in Europe?
Yeah, I think scouting is a tremendous part of obviously finding finding these kids. But also when you think about, I mean, what we're doing right now, right? We're filming this, and it's going to be broadcast, various places. The access
to millions of adoring
there you
fans.
go, millions, yeah,
millions.
yeah, millions. They're just waiting.
That's right.
To hear you talk again. But
Poor folks.
but social media and the internet and all of that has shrunk the world in a lot of ways, and so it's much more difficult for someone to go under the radar for a long period of time, because somewhere something has captured it and has broadcast it, and
they're dunking on somebody on YouTube,
or something,
Yeah.
And so the undiscovered star at 18, is very, very much fewer and far between because of all that.
Speaking of, I think we should get DK Metcalf on an NBA floor. Did you see that dunk he threw down the other?
Yeah.
Just insane,
yeah.
man. LeBron the other day was talking about how in the strike year, the Seahawks talked to him about coming in and playing tight end. Is there you think that's doable? I've never seen LeBron play in person. I mean, he's obviously a freak of nature. But,
I mean, again,
seems like a little bit of hubris. I'm no LeBron fan. Don't get me wrong.
But when you think about talent, and I said that about 5 or so minutes ago, and I referenced the AAU tournament that my son played in here in Dallas. In that facility with those gymnasiums, as 7th and 8th graders, I left that experience convinced that in probably 13 years old, so in 5 or 6 years, the majority or 50+% of the kids in that facility playing on all those different courts were future D1 athletes. Whether it's basketball, whether it's football, athleticism is athleticism.
No doubt.
And you see that. And so, could LeBron play football? I don't doubt it.
He played in high school.
Yeah, he's athletic. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, and it's just a matter of the choice you're going to make to put your body through something.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any doubt he could have done it if he wanted to.
What drew you and Rahul to basketball, to the exclusivity of other sports, or at least at this point, to the exclusivity of other sports? Personal interests?
Yeah, let's start with that. We both love basketball. Like, that was the thing that we loved the most from a sports perspective. But with what's going on with basketball right now, with the global initiative, with the players having the longest careers outside of baseball, as from a professional athlete's perspective, the changes in the collective bargaining agreement, the guarantee of contracts, all those things made it the most attractive to us. But ultimately, if we didn't like basketball, we probably wouldn't have done it. That was the first and foremost, is we love basketball. We've always loved basketball.
Cool.
And so to be able to feel like we could get into that space, be a little bit of a different approach to it than what was happening, try and figure out, why some of the statistics were the statistics, and then put some things in place to be different than the statistics for ourselves and for our players, was really a leading decider of doing it.
Is this like a career bucket list thing you're doing right now? Do you wake up some days and you're just kind of like, I'm an NBA agent, I can't really wrap my mind around this?
So I'm not an agent,
right.
Just to be clear, right? But being part of
to me you are.
Yeah, okay. But being part of FSM, yeah, it's of course it's a childhood type of thing. Yeah, it's interesting. This past Christmas, my parents came down and I guess my mom was cleaning out the closet or what have you, and I don't know, when I was in high school, I was student of the week in my little town, or student of the month in the little town I grew up in, and she gave me the interview that the paper did, and one of the questions, was around something that you are interested in, or something that you would want to see as you become older, and my answer, which was hilarious, was, I'd love to trade places for a day with a professional athlete to see, if they lead normal lives. And so there's some irony in a lot of things, right? But even at a young age, I suppose, I was 16 at that time, like this fascination or this idea of professional sports. Clearly, when we're 16, we're thinking we're going to play professionally something, right? So it's like, of course, I want to see what that's like, right? I mean, I'm in. But as you
sign me now,
yeah. But as reality sets in, you're like, oh, I guess I'm quite a bit away from that, right? So, but 20 years later, 25 years later, to be in a spot where we made this decision to start the agency, to have built the team internally, which is what our success has been all about, to build the culture, and then to have the players that we represent that really fit with what we're building and what we've built is, it's incredible. And we feel very fortunate and very blessed and are very excited about what we're doing and the impact that we're having and just the fun ride that it's been to really help these kids and be part of their lives and have them be part of ours.
I know it's not all roses, unicorns, and rainbows, though.
Yeah, no.
I know it's something that you guys committed right from the beginning. Hey, we're going to. This is going to be a grind.
Mm-hmm.
There are days where you've got to rally yourself and you've got to say, okay, one foot in front of the other. Or is it one of those deals where you kind of start gaining a little bit of momentum and then it just starts to compound on itself?
Yeah, a lot of it. There's a lot of those days, at least in the beginning, where you're having to rally yourself. Absolutely.
Just fighting self-doubt.
Well, yeah,
and stuff like that.
I mean,
Do we belong?
Well, there's always that for sure. Because the obvious answer is no. So you keep fighting to belong,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But I remember summer before the last summer of no COVID. We were in town. Rahul was up here, and we actually had a conversation of like, well, what are we doing? Like, do we keep doing this? We've made some headway. We've learned some tough lessons. We've hit some roadblocks that we didn't think we were going to hit. Like, what should we do? And I remember looking at Rahul and saying, hey, like, you know what? You've always been successful because you've done it your way. I've been relatively successful because I've, partnered with guys like you and because I've listened and done things my way. I said, we've listened to so many people for the last year, and this is like where we're at. Like, when are we just going to start doing it our way? And I said, because that's what, for people who've invested in us, like that's what they've invested in. They've invested in you, because of what you've done. They've invested in us because of what we've done. So when are you going to go do it your way? And he was like, yeah, that's okay. And the craziest part about that is, and this is where nothing is by mistake, is he lands that afternoon back in San Antonio, and there's a phone call waiting for him from someone we've never met before, who now works for us, and that person's relationship was with someone who's now one of the starting five for the Spurs, who was brand new to the Spurs organization and needed a local help in marketing and relationships, right? And so he landed, he picked up the phone, and he spent the whole weekend with that person and their family, and we ultimately signed that player about a year to the date of that initial phone call. And I mean, it's amazing. That's what it is. It's those kind of things. And so things don't happen by coincidence, I don't think, ever. Yeah. And so it just was just the kind of the coolest thing that we got done having that meeting, that conversation here in Dallas, that rededication to doing it our way, and then landing and having that phone call waiting for him.
Things don't happen by chance or for no reason, but they also don't happen by mistake. And when you're growing and you're looking at your path to success, very, very seldom is it super linear.
Right.
Whether it's Amazon or Apple or Microsoft or FSM, You can't kick your feet up and play Fortnite for the next 2 or 3 months and expect to be successful. By the same token, you got to put your head down and you got to go every day. And bad thing after bad thing after bad thing might happen.
Mm-hmm.
But every time a door gets slammed, that means a window's opening somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can silver lining any of the bad stuff or any of the no's, there are little things that'll start happening where, that path to success starts to open up.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've found. One thing you told me last time I saw you in person, we were talking about the way NBA contracts work, and this blew my mind, and I was telling Sekou again about that before you got here. So a kid gets signed by an agency who makes them all kinds of crazy promises, and they overpromise and underdeliver like you talked about, something you guys are hell-bent on not doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that kid gets a year in, and he's like, man, none of this is happening. In fact, I can't even get them on the phone or whatever, which I think might have happened with that San Antonio player. I could be wrong about the player, but if that player ends up signing with y'all, y'all don't see a dime of that rookie contract. Is that the way it works?
That's right. And until the next contract renegotiation takes place, where we're leading it, there's not a dime. That 100% of the commission of that deal goes to the agent who was with the player when they signed it.
So there's an incentive to overpromise and underdeliver then.
Sure, yeah.
Whoever talks the fastest game and's got the most flash and dash at the pitch.
Yeah, or they've been in it long enough where they represent a lot of very successful players who can make phone calls to say, hey, you should come over here, right? I'm here. It's great, right? So, and there's still a lot of that, absolutely, in this space. So, but yeah, that's the trick of starting it is, you have to go quite some time before you see some financial success, because contracts, aren't signed every year, by each player. You have to get enough critical mass to where then you start to see churn, or the deal, the next contract coming up, every year, but it's because you've got, a handful or more of players who are coming up into those situations.
It would seem to me if I was a player coming into the league, I'm 42 now.
Mm-hmm.
You're coming in the league, you're 18, 19 years old, whatever.
You still got some years, though.
Yeah, I think I can touch the net still. God. I've never been described as an outstanding athlete. I think grinder or really gritty, fighter, a brawler, blue collar, brings his lunch pail, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I would be attracted to a boutique shop.
Sure.
Where I'm like, man, I'm coming in here. I'm going to get a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be very important. That whole Jerry Maguire, movie Jerry Maguire's. Sure. He went from huge, big time, big fish in a big bowl to he had one client at the end. Yeah. And the penultimate line in that movie is, who's that guy? That's my agent. Yeah. And they're hugging and stuff at the end. Yeah. Is that what you guys are selling? These prospects is, look, we got your best interests at heart. Yeah, we're newish to the game, but you're going to be our focus.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's no doubt. That is the initial differentiator that we work towards is that plus legacy, that plus mentorship, that plus making sure that you feel like you're covered in multiple phases, on and off the court. And we do a lot of that, whether it's, having little retreats where we bring in, different apartment developers as an example. We did a deal where we rented a house in Austin for a weekend and, brought in, a venture capitalist, guy, myself, Rahul, apartment developer, and brought our players in, brought a couple former players in, right? And we just basically had a weekend retreat where we sat around and talked and just the different experiences and kind of how we think and what we're interested in and how we, opportunities. And so those types of things are important to us because, again, it's, we're doing, what we say we're going to do, which is exposing opportunities off the court that are great, not only for what they're doing currently, but also from a long-term perspective, because it creates a skill that has legs and longevity to it.
Yeah, I mean, when you watched the Jordan documentary, and that David Falk relationship is talked about, they go over that. I mean, the role that guy played in that career was huge. I would imagine that to a man at your organization, you're like, hey, we got a responsibility to these guys.
Absolutely.
And that relationship, you're talking about negotiating somebody's livelihood here.
Yeah.
That's I'm sure that the bonds you establish with these guys are pretty tight.
Yeah, we are in the process of establishing those bonds. But, we have folks that are with us that have been in this space for 20 plus years, who have represented players, that we grew up, playing. And to this day, they're very tight. Their careers are over. They're doing camps. They're on team broadcasts during the season. But whenever they're in the same town, they get together. They still chat, at least once a month, and are very close with each other's families, because for each one of them, they had a positive impact on the paths, both personally and professionally, whether it's the player and the success they had on the court and the contracts and the amount of money they were able to make, or whether it was, the agents and their ability to do that and also kind of have it go both ways. That's the fun part about it, is really being able to work towards those types of long-standing relationships, where it doesn't matter if they're on the court anymore. The bond is strong enough, and the relationship is solid enough to where it goes on.
Yeah.
And whether it's off the court opportunities or, Easter or Thanksgiving or whatever, there's the ability to continuously get together and have that relationship.
What are the most fun and then conversely the most challenging parts of your job?
I mean, the most fun, which we haven't been able to do for the past year because of COVID, is going to the games.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
because ultimately you guys are fans.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah. I mean, we're being in the arena. The access that we get in the arena is different, which is really cool. The different showcases. We had a very, very cool experience last December before last, where the G League had a showcase in Las Vegas, and they do it all the time. But for us, it was our first one. We were able to get in there because we had a couple players playing, and so we're in this basically converted hall that they put basketball courts in, and it's the showcase just for NBA front office and coaches and agents. And so we're in there, and there's all the guys that we saw growing up
Crazy.
Are now front office guys. So you're walking around, and Elton Brand's there, and North Carolina was in town playing, and so all of a sudden Roy Williams shows up with his team to watch, and you're just like, my gosh, I'm in this space watching basketball with 100 other people, but 50 of the people that are in here are people I've watched myself grow up, and they're just hanging out, because they're now in the front offices or associated with the league.
Yeah.
So those kind of things are very surreal. Some of the meetings that you're in where you're across the room with someone that you absolutely grew up watching, who you're now just doing this in a certain way, is pretty cool. And the toughest part really is when the kids are struggling. If they had a bad game or they had a series of bad runs and they're working on their confidence or playing through a situation. Those are the toughest parts, just because you feel for them because they're struggling from time to time, and so you want to be there and help them any way you can to get out of that.
Sure. Who was your favorite player growing up?
Oh, I mean, come on. Everybody loved Michael. I loved Michael. He was fantastic.
Yeah, but that can't be your answer.
No. I understand. Like, so growing up in Minnesota, the Timberwolves showed up when I was about 11.
Yeah.
And so they really didn't have anybody in the beginning. I think when I was ninth grader, they drafted Garnett, and I loved watching Garnett.
Didn't they
play.
get Joe Smith for a while? Didn't they get in a bunch of trouble for doing an under the table deal?
Well, I don't know. I don't remember that piece so much. But then they had Latrell Sprewell, and they had Sam Cassell, and they had people that they put together, and they had a pretty good run there. But I was such a Minnesota sports fan as a kid. Everything Minnesota, with the Twins, the 2 World Series they won, and the Timberwolves when they started, the Vikings. I'm a Vikings fan. So yeah. I mean, as a kid, I grew up in being in the Midwest. WGN was in everything. So that's why there's Cubs fans in Texas. But feel very fortunate to pretty much watch almost every game of Michael's career because the Bulls run every night in my house because of WGN.
Have you seen him play in person?
No.
Ever? Yeah, I never got to
I saw
either.
Kobe play in person, which was incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. The Mother's Day Massacre here in when the Mavericks knocked out. That was my wife was very, very fortunate to let me go. Or I was very fortunate for her to let me go. It's the best way to say it.
There you go.
My friends were like, "What?" Because one of our kids was only 1 month old.
Yeah.
And it was Mother's Day, and I had tickets, and she's like, "Yeah, just go." And I was like,
"Wow,
all right,
that's
fine."
amazing.
Yeah. And so to be at that game was pretty awesome.
No doubt.
Yeah, really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you're talking to these kids when they have a tough game or a tough stretch of games, are you able to kind of mentor them a little bit by saying, "Hey man, you're up against some adversity here, and the way you handle this is going to define you to a degree. If you run and hide, people are going to know a lot about you." You learn the most about someone when the chips are down. When they're under duress. No one likes that. No one enjoys that sensation. Although as you get older, you start to go, "Oh, we're in some adversity right now," and you can see adversity is just an opportunity with a shadow on it. Or you can be like, "Oh no, the rock's coming down the hill at me, and my day is over." How do you coach them through that stuff?
A lot of it's experience, because they're half our age.
Yeah, if that.
So you have those life experiences about perseverance and about the process and about seeing it through and just continuing to work and work on the right things and your opportunity will come, and it's no different than professionally building a team internally or your kids to a certain extent. Each one of us have different relationships with our players. Some are stronger than others, some just because of various things, experiences, physical location, what have you, which is a uniqueness of how spread out we are across the country. So that gives us different access points to be able to work with them depending on their situation. And so, last year as an example, we're very fortunate to have one of our players played for the Mavericks organization and spent most of the year, playing for the Legends up in Frisco. And so because he was here in Dallas and I was here in Dallas, the chance to have him over to the house and the chance to take him out to dinner, the chance to go to the games and be at the games and meet with him after, and just kind of know that, hey, you're working through this, you're pursuing your dream, you're playing well. Some games you're not playing because of what they're trying to teach you, and just keep going. And you definitely get involved with that and are a sounding board for a lot of things and an encouraging force for a lot of things as well. And that particular situation, he was able to go to Germany this year, and he's playing over there, at a much higher level with a lot more exposure.
Awesome.
And it only happened, because of the experience he had at the G League, here for the Legends, and got the opportunity to go play at a higher level, which will probably get him back here quicker.
No doubt.
Than if he tried to keep playing, G League.
Yeah. As co-founder of the enterprise, what's your job description? What are your responsibilities?
So I'm the president and the chief operating officer. So I've always been.
You're running the numbers.
Yeah, well, we have a CFO that does that. I mean, I've always been an operations guy. I was the first guy to invest.
So putting
with
people,
Rahul.
putting people in the right
running
positions.
teams. I my strength or what I like to do is not being the face necessarily. Rahul is a great face for it. I like working with our teams. I like working, with the people on staff. I like organize it. I like making sure that, we're humming along and we have the right structure, and that we're executing internally. That's kind of my bread and butter with anything. I don't love walking into a room where I don't know anybody and then having everybody know me by the time I leave. Like that, I don't love that. I like to partner with people who like that. I like the details of the operation and really working with the teams internally to achieve and execute at a high level.
How do you leverage results without micromanaging? And are you constantly critiquing yourself like, am I over the line of micromanaging, or are you just, winging it? And hey, whatever come whatever may. I mean, we're gonna get there by hook or by crook. I don't care if somebody thinks I stepped on their toes because I micromanaged them. I'm trying to help them get I'm trying to help them produce. I'm trying to help them make it happen.
Right. Yeah. For me, it's just about building confidence. So I'll work with somebody pretty closely until I feel confident in their understanding, their ability to do it. And then from there, I turn them loose. And, I love and work through the faction of hey, if you identified a problem or identified a obstacle, great, come to me and what is it and how do you think we should solve it, right? And so lots of times, I'll whether it's FSM or Invoke or anything, my first response back is, well, what do you think?
Love it.
Right? What do you think?
So you're turning them into problem solvers.
Yeah. What do you think? Like, I can certainly try and give you the answer to the best of my ability, but like, what do you think?
Yeah.
Because the part that I think is fun about that is, and I learned this from one of my mentors a long time ago, is like, hey, like, you shouldn't be the smartest guy in the room. You should be the dumbest guy in the room, right? Because if you have a bunch of smart people that are you've empowered, then the whole organization floats. So never be afraid to delegate, to people that can teach you, and never be closed off to learning, because you never know where your next good idea is going to come from. It might come from someone who works for you, right? And then when that happens, make sure everybody knows that idea came from him or her. Mm-hmm. It's not mine, right? Because there's so many people that are fearful of somebody else getting credit when they feel like they should be getting it. I've never really cared about credit.
Where does that come from, that lack of ego? How have you been able to divorce yourself? Is that a faith thing? Is that come from that
look, at the end
golf
of the day,
coach guy?
We all have ego to a certain extent.
Yes,
right? but I think I've always tried to be focused on the end result, on the finish line. The win. Yeah. Not if I led it or if I'm the face of the win. Like, I just want the win. And so, I played basketball as a kid on a very good team that we won. I played golf growing up on a team that won. Everything athletically until I was physically capped out. I played on very successful teams. And what we learned through all that was the most important thing is the win. Some days and some games, like, you're going to lead it. Some games you're going to lead it. But at the end of the day, all we want is the W.
That's it.
And so in business, that I think lots of times sports translates to business, and team sports can translate to business. And I think for me, that is a big part of my sort of upbringing in team sports that translated to business is I just care about the W. I don't need the credit. I just want to be part of the team that wins. If I happen to be leading it, that's great. But I'll defer to everybody who had a successful part in it getting there. I don't care as long as we win.
Do you have prerequisites? Somebody applies for a job opening. You have to have played team sports.
No. That just goes back to like interviewing somebody and looking at their resume and talking with them a few different times, getting a sense of how they got to this part of their career. You can tell a lot of things on a resume, but ultimately it's just through making sure that they're a good cultural fit, and that if they're a good cultural fit, you can teach them anything because they'll be open to learning, and that's what you want.
No doubt, man. If any of the millions of folks watching this want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
I have Instagram. I've got Facebook. My email address is Matt_Fossey@hotmail.com.
Love it.
I still have Hotmail. My wife makes fun of me.
So
but,
clutch.
Yeah, but Hotmail's clutch.
Hotmail's Hotmail, man.
It's Hotmail. So
I still have Hotmail. dieselrugby@hotmail.com.
There you go. See?
Old school Hotmail.
Yeah.
I haven't checked that in a couple of years. I probably should.
Yeah, well, I check it every now and then.
I might have won a contest or something.
Yeah,
I just don't know.
Yeah, you had the winning lottery ticket
or grittiest player
one of the two
on the field.
Yeah.
Man, I apprioate your time.
It was awesome. Thank you.
Very much
fun.
fun.
So fun.
Yeah,
really
awesome.
fun.
That was great. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Matt's awesome. I always say high energy, but Matt's a really good guy, and he's a really good people person. Not very often you find a good money and numbers person and people person. We talked about that a little bit. I hope you enjoyed it. Hey, I'd love to know what you think about these podcasts. I do them. I really get a kick out of them. I hope that you like listening to them. Drop a comment below. You can hit me anytime on Instagram @Jess from the Northwest or email me live@autographconstruction.com if you'd like to work together, and we'll see you guys next time.